and we welcome you to the Dr. Tech Show and Tech Talk on Hope Radio with myself, Pauline Roche, and Sweyn Hunter, an occasional guest who guide you to the world of online communications in a show which was the brainchild of the late great internet evangelist John Popham. And the show actually started a year ago on the 18th of May, so we're very happy to be celebrating a year of recording this show. So let's have a weather check. Emma Bearman is our very special guest today. Emma, where are you and how's the weather where you are?
I'm in Leeds and the sun has literally just come out this second after we had downpours.
Okay, good to know. And Sweyn, how are you? Where are you? How's the weather?
Very well, and I'm in Orkney as usual. And the weather is overcast, but it's been lovely and warm the last couple of days, so that's good.
And here in Birmingham, it is. I haven't got the curtains open today, but the blinds, but it's light coming through, so it's obviously not raining or not dark at the moment. So it's good to know, and we hope it'll be okay for a walk later on today. So before we get to hear more from Emma, which we're looking forward to very much, and you can enjoy her, if you're on YouTube, you can see her screen, her drawing behind her, Playbox. We'll hear a lot more about that in a few minutes. But we mark a few things around this week, and Monday the 17th to Sunday 23rd of May is Dementia Action Week, and in this week, Alzheimer's Society is calling on the government to cure the care system now. They're saying that nearly 1 million people with dementia and their families are struggling to get the support and care they need and deserve. And if you look on the Alzheimer's.org.uk website, there are some very moving videos of what they say are the issues that people who are caring for people with dementia are suffering from. And it's interesting to note that I was watching another video that said that a lot of there are other types of dementia besides Alzheimer's, but Alzheimer's is the one that gets the most notice because people, physicians basically had to bill for their work. So they often said Alzheimer's when it might be some other kind of dementia. There's over 100 apparently different types. So, but we hope that people who need the support will get it, and we hope that they also become included digitally. So we send them all our best wishes. And this week, also Thursday, 20th of May, is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And the purpose of this day is to get everyone talking, thinking, and learning about digital access and inclusion, and the more than 1 billion people worldwide with disabilities and impairments. They're saying that someone with a disability must be able to experience web-based services, content, and other digital products with the same successful outcome as those without disabilities. And obviously, there are a huge range of disabilities and various tools and software available to support people with disabilities. And again, we hope that people learn about what they need and get what they need. I read a lot about this on the internet, and there are things available that I have known about. And so as we hope we can spread more awareness of what is available for people to help them with their access needs. Which leads me on to the next event for this week is Thursday 20th, the Festival of Accessibility, which is the very first virtual conference. And this is an event that is going to celebrate the amazing achievements made in the ally space so far. They're going to have a range of experts to discover key learnings and find out what's next. And they invite people to explore how you could and should be building accessibility into your digital plans, and find out how we continue to, in the words of someone called Joe Devon, work together to change the world. And they had some statistics on it of how many kind of homepages have access issues, etc. So it's worth visiting that accessibility-festival.vfairs.com website to see the different areas of accessibility that they're going to be talking about this week. And one of our guests who popped in last week was Dulcie Vousden from the Data for Good Festival. And the festival, you'll be glad to hear, goes on with Fringe events all month. And so this week, they are drawing our attention to this series of events run by external partners under the festival umbrella. On Tuesday, the 18th of May, Data Orchard, one of the partners, is doing fruitful chats about data. And also on the 18th of May from 10 to 12 is Data Talks, which is hosted by Maggie Philbin, OBE. And she's going to be joined by Robin Windsor, who's a highly influential futurist, known for being both a playful and provocative agent of change. And when we talk about play, that's one of Emma's keywords, so we'll be coming back to that. Robin will be discussing the role of artificial intelligence in modern teaching models and what intelligent machines will mean for students and teachers in the 21st century. And again, referring back to one of our previous guests, Ben Haddock from Sandwell Fab Labs, Sandwell Fab Labs. They do a lot of Tuesday sessions about AI and how can be helpful to students and teachers. So I really enjoy attending their sessions. I can highly recommend them. Also on Tuesday, 18th of May, there's an event called Data Tech, which is hosted by Gemma Milne, science writer and PhD researcher at UCL. And this brings together members of industry, the public sector, and academia to discuss emerging research in data science. On Wednesday, 19th of May, there's a session called The Problem with Big Tech, putting privacy, ethics, and sustainability first in your digital and data projects. And Wednesday, 19th of May also is Data Talent, which is a forum for students where they can land their dream job and employers can recruit their ideal candidate. And the host of that will again be Maggie Philbin, OBE. And the final event of this listing is on Thursday, 20th of May, we have Measuring the Impact of Charitable Investment. And this is a story of how pro bono or volunteers conducted an impact evaluation for Bullion Community Resource Centre and how this work proved the social impact the centre had on the community, with this data then available to use for future funding bids. And pro bono or are a series of volunteers who do operational research freely for charities who apply. So it can be very valuable for charities who can't afford to pay for a data science person, but they can get some volunteer support. An event that's been running, I think, in Scotland, Data Fest 21, Sweyn may know more of this, from March and runs on to November 2021. The overarching theme of our data, which is the theme this year, will be explored to spark discussion about how we as data users and as a community can use data for good to help solve or ease the world's problems. And they're having thematic events on during the year up to November, and this week's theme is Our Future. So we recommend that to people to go and have a look at. It is on the screen now. Sweyn has the page, and it says our future will tackle cutting-edge technologies and innovative use of AI and our data over 3 fantastic events: Data Talks, Data Tech, and Data Talent. And that's some of the events that I referred to earlier under the Data for Good Festival. So there's good crossover between Data Fest and the Data for Good Festival. A couple of more things before we start talking to Emma. One is that the Digital Inclusion Policy and Research Conference is coming up in September with the topics of digital inclusion, data literacy, COVID-19 digital inequalities, and more. And they're inviting abstracts from anybody who wants to submit, and we're considering it. And they're inviting scholars and practitioners to talk about their latest work and what many consider as a crucial point for digital inclusion, digital divides, and data literacy. Who got left behind and struggled the most during the pandemic? What new digital practices emerged to help people manage their well-being and survival? Did technology interventions such as contact tracing apps actually help manage the pandemic? How did different communities organize to assist each other by digital means, etc.? So sounds like a fantastic conference, and I'm really looking forward to it myself, even if our submission isn't accepted. So I recommend anybody else who wants to submit an abstract. If you've been doing something to help people get online during the pandemic, then this sounds like the kind of event that you might like to submit to. And finally, I just wanted to cover, which I picked up today, the Citizens Online launched a digital skills helpline during the pandemic. It may have been a while ago, but I just saw it on Twitter this morning. They've got a free digital skills helpline to support digital inclusion, and the number is 0800 196 5833. That's 0800 196 5833. And they launched this because of the greater difficulty people have accessing local support over the past year or so, and the limitations of support from family and friends. So we know the family and friends have been helping people get online, but Citizens Online have been doing this for a long time, longer than most of us. So it's well worth asking them for help if you need help around digital inclusion. So we are delighted, again, as I said earlier, to welcome Emma Bearman to the show. Emma believes if we do things playfully, creatively, and take care of people, we'll encourage a culture of participation in people's lives, and that's music to our ears. I asked Emma for some information to describe her when I'm introducing her, and she helpfully sent me a couple of tweets to explain what she does. And Emma understands community building through digital platforms. And in collaboration, she has set up the Armley Tourist Board and won Friendly Street in Britain 5 years later. She set up the Twitter account, I think, Culture Vultures, and ran hundreds of events of all types. She set up the Armley Good Stuff Facebook group. She's on the board of West Leeds Dispatch. She ran with a small team a citywide festival of making and creativity called March of the Robots. She's part of Digital Access DAW Yorks and understands digital access, equity, and dignity. She worked with major organizations on the social media and developed digital inclusion projects. She understands and appreciates the maker culture and physical computing / tinkering. She runs programs such as YouTube Makers / Bakers Club and Young Inventors Club, and she instigated Love to Play 2021 as a digital week of play, prompting outdoor fun. The thing Emma does say about herself in the last, though, is that she would rarely consider herself in the digital or tech ecosystem. I'm staggered, Emma. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, afternoon.
You're definitely part of the ecosystem, certainly the ecosystem that we enjoy. I don't know how you can consider yourself to be not part of it, and I'm sorry if other people have made you feel not part of it.
No, I don't think it's anybody's made me feel that way. It's not an excluded feeling. It's just that I don't need. That's not my first a way of going about the world. I suppose I don't think. Oh, I'm in that industry or that sector. I'm just like, how can I make something happen? How can we make something happen? It's pretty much the question I'll start with.
That sounds a lot like what John Popham used to say.
Mm.
So I think you're definitely in the club, whatever that club is, and that club needs expanding if you feel it doesn't include you, you know. But as I say, welcome to the show. You've done such an amazing amount of things. How did you get started? What was your early career or your early life in this field like?
Well, actually, one thing I missed out on that, and it's probably quite foundational actually, was that I used to work for a computer learning centre as a franchise called New Horizons, and that was my first proper job, I think, after I graduated. And I was this commission-only salesperson in a business-to-business world of emerging technologies, I suppose. And our whole ethos was about enabling people to go from, I suppose, like a DOS-based system. This is really going to age me, isn't it? DOS to GUI, graphical interface of Windows and all those emerging Microsoft Office products. And I loved that job actually, because it really wasn't about the technology. Yet again, it was about people and their kind of fears and concerns, I guess. Even then, like going, I'm used to using a card index file. You know, I'm the knowledge holder in this organization. I know every single name on that, database as it was. Why would I want to share that knowledge? Why would I want to use mail merge? And so that's one example. And I suppose seeing how transformational it could be to have all those fears before they came in for, beginning Windows or whatever it might have been, and then going away and actually feeling like, oh, I can get on with some other work now because that bit, which actually was quite boring after all, let's be honest, is I can automate it. And so, yeah, having those stories, I think, of like how tech and digital made a difference to people's lives was where it started, I think. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we did sort of very technical workshops like TCP/IP, and cloud-based computing was just starting to sort of really emerge at that point. And so we had very clever boffin type instructors come in, and I honestly have no idea what they were talking about most of the time, but I had to sell those courses to IT people, so I had to kind of have a basic grasp of it. So I suppose that's where it did all start, in terms of seeing how having mastery over the thing that you had to get comfortable with made people feel more effective, I suppose, in their work. And that was always quite compelling. And then I suppose in terms of community, it was easier to create a blog rather than put 1,000 CDs of an event that you did. So I was just like, well, let's just stick it on a blog, shall we? And then all those pictures on Flickr can be shared with communities. And it really was just laziness, I think.
I find that hard to believe, looking at your output over the last number of years since I've
Effectiveness,
known you.
efficiency, something like that.
Yes.
Probably a better way of
Yes.
putting it. But yeah, it's like, why would I want to sit here and burn all these CDs so I could go and give them to everybody after we'd had a big street party? And that's where the Armley Tourist Board emerged, was the blog came out of a really big street party called Jam Up the Back Passage.
Excellent. Did that get coverage in the national press?
Well, the whole so it wasn't. I know it's really important at this stage that nothing happens on your own. Okay, so I am a terrible instigator of jumping off the edge of a cliff, though. So I will be the one who goes, why don't we? And then I want to sort of like immediately run for the hills as soon as I've got everybody doing something. So the street party stuff was really that we had backstreet. There were loads of people. It was the summer of sort of 96, I think, where the Euros were on, or I don't know, it's really warm, and we just started lugging all of our stuff out into the back street and making a living room of it. And then we were like, let's have a party. And it just went from there to this idea of massive street party. And we went and knocked on everybody's doors and we made flyers. And the flyers were really fun because they were like, so things like, there are 56 cats that live on this street, and there are people who make amazing cakes without using flour. And so it kind of presented back to people a little bit of who they were, but they didn't necessarily know their neighbours. And we knew there were loads of musicians. So ultimately we sort of created this little stage area and people jammed all through the evening. And babies were conceived that evening as well, which felt like a major something I might add. So 5 years later, after this, kind of catalysed loads and loads of community stuff, really, from that to cake competitions and charity calendars, and it was really beautiful. And then Radio 5 kind of said, look, which is the friendliest street in Britain? And of course, we knew that we weren't the friendliest. We thought we'd go for it. And by that point, I was such a whiz at marketing, actually, having learned all of these, you know, from blogging to email, kind of what were they called? And it was before MailChimp came along anyway, you know, like learning how to segment, just doing things to make this blog really powerful. So the Armley Tourist Board was the website, and really it was funny because Armley was considered #1 travel town in the Google rankings at that point.
Wow.
So to call it a sort of tourist board, and I was the Lady Mayoress of Armley, self-appointed.
I like that. I like it when people take the titles, you know, stuff the officialdom.
Yeah, and by the end of it, actually, people thought I had power, which was really hilarious. So they wanted me to come along and open fates and resolve disputes.
I hope you did.
Did you get regalia? Did you get some regalia?
I
like
bought my own
chain?
bling. I bought like really like encrusted sort of bling bling. It was, the shop was called Bling Bling in Leeds Markets. So I think I've still got those chains of office somewhere. I'm refusing to relinquish them. But yeah, so I think, you know, the power of technology really enabled us to, as I put it, mobilize a mob, really, or galvanize a gathering. I came up with loads of like alliterative kind of puns from it all, really. So yeah, the Radio 5 Live thing, we just won because we knew how to mobilize the mob to vote.
Yay.
So then we've got in the Guardian and all the rest of it.
I didn't know that. Great.
Yeah, that was 2004. So I really feel quite old when I'm going back, like 1996, and oh my god, yeah.
So what happened after 2004 then? What happened next?
So after the tourist board stuff, no, that was 2008. So the tourist board, I did actually, one of my favourite things was I then did go and talk at regional tourism conferences.
Fantastic.
So I was invited at the time when they were calling it Web 2.0.
Okay.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Yeah, and it was really threatening because TripAdvisor was bothering people a lot with people being able to have their own opinions on stuff. So it was in that context that I was invited to talk to like independent small B&Bs and the tourism industry in Exeter as well, actually, to kind of talk about how you could work with people's opinions and harness the power of your citizens and residents to be the people who tell the story of your uniqueness, which is what we've been doing really through the Ireland Tourist Board. And then I did one up in Lytham St Anne's as well. And I was like, this is a marker of like a high point in my life, really, that I'm actually being paid and flown, in fact, to Exeter to go and, as the Lady Mouse of Army, talk about running a fake website called the Army Tourist Board.
Brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
So when in your long and illustrious, I have to say illustrious career so far, Emma, really, did you meet John Popham?
Oh, so John, so we set up a thing called the Culture Vulture. I want to say, well, it's when my daughter was very little, so it'd be 2008 or 9, I'd say. And John was, and it's almost like we have parallel things going on. So I would be doing sort of tech or blogger meetups, people who like to blog, and John would be doing things like the social media surgery. And so we were very, very aware of each other, but we didn't always kind of come together in work. But I think the sort of main aims were very, very similar, which was empowering people to use the tools that help them do what they wanted to communicate. Yeah. So I think we were probably like, if he was at that sort of very early stage of like, I haven't got an absolute clue, why would I use digital anything? We were probably the next bit on, which was, I've got a blog, but nobody's jumping on it, and I'm running out of ideas, or actually, why am I even doing this kind of level? So I think we kind of worked quite well in that sense of like, he was there for the baby, you know, absolute like entry point of coming into using digital, and very creating that, you know, really good volunteers as well, you know, like people who really wanted to help with that. And we would like, we got a little bit further down the line, now what do you want to do with it? So it sort of seemed to work quite organically in a way, in a sort of city kind of way of people doing stuff. And then I think we did work together actually on a project with Asda, which was a digital tea party in a care home in East Leeds, I think it was. And it was great working with him. I mean, it was really, he's so laid back. And his experience was just like, it will unfold, it will be lovely, you know, people will, you know, very much the ethos of, it's not the digital, it's the connection, it's the human connection that matters. And it's the reasons why and the motives as to why people will want to, you know, use technology for any reason. So very much about stories and history and quite a lot of, you know, even just talking about people's music and their preferred bands or stories of where they used to grow up or live. And, you know, you could see that gave so much more desire to even explore what YouTube could do for them or other, or Facebook even. So very, very people-centered stuff, really.
Yeah. And what was the last contact that you had with him? Do you remember?
I actually saw him in the flesh was when he came and visited me when I was doing some stuff in the Play Lab, which was the first time we did Play Lab, which was an empty shop that we took over near Leeds Markets. And that was 2018, I think, was the last time I actually saw him. And he came down with his camera and he was recording us on the day when there were loads of kids making slime. It was chaos-ish. Oh yeah, it was chaos. And then just did a really lovely little kind of broadcast, which was really nice. But he's so unobtrusive as well. I kind of just slipped in when, you know, just very, you know, that thing of someone being in your life, but you're not always truly putting the spotlight on them. Yeah. They're putting the spotlight on other people always.
Well, I think he never felt the story was about him. It was always about other people and what they wanted to do. And as we often say on this show, you know, helping people to have a natter, you know, just using what was there, making what was there theirs rather than somebody else's, and giving them the tools so they could do it themselves and not have to not always have to rely on other people.
I
So
think
tell us about.
Oh, sorry,
Sorry.
I was going to say some of the things I really did appreciate about John as well, and I think there were times when he wanted to say things and didn't, and then as he became aware of, you know, his illness probably not really being reversible, I suppose, was when he started to talk about some of his challenges with, you know, civic empowerment and civic stuff, which, you know, off the record we'd have chatted about over the years. And I always feel like it's a shame that it's like a lone person who gets to the point when they make that decision in their life that they're going to have that voice, because there's nothing to lose at that stage.
Yeah.
And I know he'd wrestled with it, but I think there's something around how it shouldn't be down to one person. We shouldn't have to have the Johns of the world to create the space for us to speak our truth to power. So I think there's something in the legacy of John, really, which is how do we do more of that? Because there's a lot of things that we just choose not to face into because it's pragmatic to do, to keep quiet or what have you. So I'd like to think that apart from all the very gentle ways he went around nudging and nattering and stuff, some of the more important conversations need to happen, and creating space for those and being honest. I think we've gone a long way from that sort of civic discourse. Really.
Yeah, I think his family would support that. Definitely, we are in touch with them from time to time, and they're happy for us to continue this. But yeah, John's legacy should be much more far-reaching. We hope. I was going to say something. Yeah. I mean, we had Rebecca Ray Evans on recently, Emma, who's one of the linchpins in the UK Tech for Good organisers network, and I would hope that network would give people a home, people like John and myself and yourself, a home to do those things, with, you know, and find fellow travelers there. So I don't know if you were at the launch, were you? Did you know about it?
No.
Okay. Well, I certainly think you'd find a home there.
I think so. I mean, even the stuff that you were sort of pinpointing and that's going on this week, I was like, wow, there's so much going on I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're doing such great service of highlighting that as well. I think because, you know, the data, AI ethics stuff, that is very interesting as well. And I think having homeschooled in the last year, one of the things that when we did March the Robots back in 2014, that was a lot of future gazing stuff as well as making. So we're making robots from, you know, cardboard to code and everything in between. We did 107 events in 64 locations, so it's very expansive. But one of the things that I really did a lot of was reading what the future would look like, kind of stuff. And robot teachers was one of the things that sort of was strongly predicted. And I was like, I really can't. And the idea was actually, and you know, the way it was presented would be the telepresence robots in the classroom. And my brain couldn't quite compute that as a reality that I could imagine. I was like, well, why would you do that, really? So whilst the pandemic kind of went, okay, so that was a really unhelpful visualization of future teaching, because it just makes you fixate on the physical robot, not the actual, what's actually happening. So it's fascinating in the sort of light of what we measure and monitor and value in terms of our current primary and high school education, really, to be a participant, a co-participant with my son and his learning, and think, oh, that's really interesting. Look how they're using Google Classrooms, or look how they're using Oak Academy materials, and what are they actually measuring, you know? So a good example will be my son was asked to do a piece of persuasive writing using fronted adverbials with Oak Academy guidance teaching sort of materials, and the purpose was to convince the local MP that everybody should wear school uniform. There was no question of should they or shouldn't they. If this was your purpose, write a very persuasive letter to your local MP. So obviously you can imagine what I was like, sitting there trying not to interfere too much with this activity, but thinking, what are we actually doing? What is this all about? And so he wrote a very, very persuasive, very beautiful, the vocabulary was amazing, very expressive. And then we got a voice note in terms of the teacher's appreciation of his work. And most of it was around grammatical things he could improve. And nothing really about the actual content or the concepts he was trying to convey as a human being, really. And I was like, a robot could actually have gone through, and AI would have allowed for that teacher to be pretty expendable, not far from now. And I don't think we're really having those conversations, which is what we're marking and measuring is not the human capacity to be expressive, imaginative. It's looking at, did that fall in the right place? Did you have the right punctuation? Did you and I'm like, that a robot could easily, an AI could definitely do that very quickly. So what are we walking into? It's those types of questions, like, it needn't be necessarily dystopic. I'm pretty sure we're not having those conversations around centralization of learning resources, what we actually measure, what we value young people for. Anyway, I don't know if this is the gist of today's conversation, but I don't think we can do things playfully if we don't take care of some of the really serious. So you've got to be able to, be earnest and playful in equal measure.
Yeah, excellent. What a great way of putting it, Emma. I think, we'd certainly agree with that. And this is why I think, in all seriousness, you are needed in the world of digital and tech, because your vision is crucial, I think, to the well-being and the vision and the imagination of people that they just don't get exposure to elsewhere.
I wouldn't necessarily have these points of view if it hadn't been for March of the Robots, though, and that some of the behavioural change pieces that were being predicted in not even that long ago, that you can look at the lens of the pandemic as a really useful one to say, well, I can see how now we are now acceptant of things that we would not have been 5-6 years ago.
Yeah. And
that obviously doesn't make me a conspiracy theorist, but I can go, that was predicted. Some of this has been long predicted.
I drove to Surrey at the weekend to see my sister, and I had a conversation in the car with my smartphone with, hey Google, talking about asking when the next, road sign was coming up and stuff like that. But also, I said to it, as you do, what's your name? And they said, well, I'm Google Assistant. Would you like a nickname? So we had a chat about whether they'd like to give me a nickname. Now, I can't remember the whole lot of it, but they liked a long, did I want a short nickname or a long nickname? And so I went for a long one. And the first part was Captain Choo Choo. I mean, I don't know what they think they know about me, but I don't like trains. I mean, I'm not a train, kind of nerd. I like being on trains. I don't want to know anything else about them, the numbers or anything like that, unlike other people of my acquaintance. But, I wouldn't have dreamt, even last year, I've been having a conversation with my smartphone about nicknames. So,
Is Captain Choo Choo something you chose or they chose?
They chose.
Oh, so I mean, the algorithm's a long way off yet then.
Well, they obviously weren't reading my emails yesterday, so on Saturday, yeah. So tell us a bit more about the March of the Robots. I mean, I remember when at the Impact Hub in Birmingham, which I know you've been to,
yes.
I think we met there physically a number of years ago. They did a kind of a maker robot making section, but I think wasn't yours more technical?
Oh, we did a bit of everything, really. I mean, they kind of, think it started off as most things do in them, because I don't have a grand date. What does the end look like? That's my big challenge in life, actually. I don't know what it's going to look like, so I'm not very good at articulating the end of something. So I was like, let's just see what we can make. Let's see what, and then someone said, well, why don't you have a target, like 10,000 robots? And it was the most favorite thing I ever did, was to go for that target, because then it just was like this machine of a year of like, oh my God, I'm trying to hit the target. We made about 7,000, I think, in the end, roughly. Not that I was really counting, if I'm really honest. It was just, it was an insane project, and because it had no end, not enough money, and so it was like every person I come into contact with, I would have a conversation with them about robots. Poor bastards. It was just like, oh my God, you're relentless. So it was chocolate robots, it was cardboard, it was who's coding, it really was this mission to find out anything and everything and everybody, from the university to people in garages, to people who made stuff out of scrap, to massive robots which were made out of landfill junk, with kids up in Seacraft. It really had no bounds to it. Films. One of my favourite films was, now I've forgotten the name of it. It's just perfectly appropriate because it was about dementia. There's some clues there. Robot and Frank, was it? Did you ever watch that?
What?
Say again?
Oh God, it's a brilliant film. It's about dementia, and it was a robot care companion. I'm pretty sure it's called Robot and Frank.
Okay.
Oh, no, not heard of that.
Oh, dude. Anyway, so that was a brilliant film. So we showed that in a library with lots of older people, and it was about dementia and this robot taking the place of the librarian, which we didn't really appreciate until we actually watched it together for the first time in a library of older people, and the librarian's job being taken out by the robot. So yeah, there was so many wonderful parts of it, and I think that's probably the roots of where I'm doing the digital access stuff now. Really was that even at that point we were kind of visiting primary schools and doing very early sort of Raspberry Pi scratch, kind of making robot arms out of cardboard, but then also applying kind of computational thinking to how you would make hands, let's say. So very quite young kids, sort of year 2 or 3, maybe 2 to 4, and then so nothing massively complicated. But what we were also realizing at that point was literacy was equally, if you couldn't spell, it's going to be hard to code.
Yeah.
And confidence, so primary school teachers, on the whole at that point hadn't been confronted with like physical computing or coding, any of that stuff really, and so it was all a bit of fun really. There was nobody that would have had that really as their remit. We are going to be introducing Scratch or code clubs, and we did go across the city, so we saw a real variety of different classroom settings, and you could sort of see that they could be quite different in age or confidence, let's say, in each sort of year group. And so whilst we weren't doing that as a formal outcome really of the project, it was a very it's interesting to think actually there's a lot of female primary school teachers mostly. It wasn't really a sort of curriculum thing at that point, so there was no real pressure on any primary school to be thinking about computing, and if they were, it was usually iPads and doing stuff on iPads. So after that though, I was kind of reflective of the fact that we assume people are growing up as digital natives, and that wasn't really what we were feeling as we were doing something quite sort of not head on, but we're definitely thinking actually it's not digital natives, not in a comprehensive way across the confidence of the teaching staff.
Really?
Or the school governors. It wasn't, these primary schools were not digitally confident places really. And then I'd go to the Bet Show, and you could kind of go, I don't know if you've ever been to the Bet Show, But the Bet Show was like, it's all the gadgets, it's all the software, it's all the educational stuff. It's like Excel down in London, and it's like miles of walking around, trade show stands, a little bit of steam at the end, bit of fun, but most of it's about selling stuff really to the educational sector. And I was like, there's a massive disconnect, I think, with people buying stuff because it's what they're sold and not actually what might be useful. That's a bit harsh. You won't want to broadcast this.
I think that's we don't do editing. We don't do editing. No, I think until very recently that's been the case. I think there's a little bit of progress being made on that now, partly, as you say, due to the pandemic. But yeah, the disconnect between what people who are focused on the technology produce and what is actually useful and needed in the classroom, it's the same in every sector. There's always that gap, and it's really people like you who are pointing it out that are needed to who are involved in both and who are pointing this out, that we need a lot more of that, really, I think.
I think because it's not my specialism, I guess this is again where I go back to that whole, like, this is not my world. You know, I'll have moved on to doing other things, and it's not the thing I've made my career out of, and it's not the thing I focus on every day going, this is the thing that needs solving. It's so it's that thing of going, actually, you sort of poke your head up a bit and then go, oh, and then you get on with other things. So that's what happened, I suppose, after March of the Robots. Just carried on with the play boxes and other stuff. And it's only when the pandemic really did sort of immediately, it was April last year, I suppose, I was immediately minded of this kind of sense that actually not all schools would have the means and capability to support their children and families. And I was working on a project which is called YouTube Makers Club, and we had what was called inclusive growth funding towards some of the spaces being freely available to people who couldn't afford them. And I knew for a fact that children across the city didn't all have access to the kit to be able to make content, for example. So the minute we had to close our doors down as a physical space, which we were running YouTube Makers Club in the Play Lab, I was like, well, there's a lot of children who we don't know how many children actually, and that was one of the bigger issues for me, was we never really sought, and it's not just true of the local authority I'm in, and I had actually advised this to a local authority about 2 or 3 years earlier. I was like, I think you could really understand where children and families are. I know that's not the entire focus, because a lot of focus will be at older age and vulnerable adults in terms of making sure that they're not excluded. I said, I think you'll find that if you were to ask every school to benchmark right now how much homework has to be done as paper-based homework still, you would get really good insight across the local authority as to who might be struggling, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, and that question had come from someone asking about how they would know how to pinpoint support for and the rollout of universal credit.
Yes.
And universal credit being a digital service. And so I don't know if that ever went any further. I made a strong recommendation, but then it's always been there as a kind of, how do we know what the issue is if we don't actually ask the question?
And that was definitely one of the main problems at the very beginning of the lockdown. Nobody really knew where the assistance was required, and as well as giving the assistance, we had to find out where and who.
And if people can't communicate, they
That's
can't
right.
tell you.
That's
You
right.
can't physically visit them.
No.
So the obvious ways in which to do that would be to follow the sort of free school meals trail, or the, you know, food bank, you know, some of the obvious places. But as the pandemic progressed, and obviously to school, you know, your families which might have more than 2 children needing online lessons to be delivered at the same time as not asynchronous but actually live lessons started to make the pressure even bigger. So I think even if you'd have done a kind of beginning in April, the need would have been quite different to where it was again in January in 2021. But even so, I think we're still on the back foot, and, you know, getting that kind of information out of the DFEE on a local level to be able to say, look, community, do you want to step in? It's not just the job of the local authority in a time of you know, academization, where it's very difficult for that kind of level of information to be made available. You could look at the sort of indices of deprivation. You can look at some of the data, but we could do better than that. And I think to even have those conversations makes it look like, or it makes people feel like they're on the back foot and defensive.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're saying, well, you should have done this. And it's like, well, for good or bad, we haven't, but can we now aim towards this not being a situation we have to face into in the future again?
Which brings us up to digital access, West Yorkshire, and you bringing together all those people up and down the country, Emma, you and others, to talk about the schemes that are being established left, right and centre. I found those meetings very useful, and in fact Martin Saunders from Horsham and Surrey has been on, I think it's Horsham, has been on the show to talk about his local scheme, and we have, we encourage others to join us as well. So that was something else that you did, but we haven't talked about Playbox, which is the picture behind you, and I want to give you some time to do that before we move on to some more stories towards the end of the show. So do you want to bring us right up to date with what you're trying to do now?
Yeah, I mean, the issue I've got, right, is in order to have fun, which is my actual principle in life, I can't do it if it means other people aren't able to have fun. So it's like, kind of like, oh, Jesus, right? I've got to get myself into things that really shouldn't be my concern. So the bit of the Playbox. Playbox, for those who don't know, because I'm obviously assuming everybody knows what Playbox is a 20-foot shipping container, or 40-foot. It doesn't actually matter how big it is. It's the fact that it's something that wasn't there yesterday, but is now there. Like the circus has come to town, and it could stay for a little while or a long while. And the reason why a shipping container and not a wooden structure is, sadly, a match can destroy everybody's hopes and dreams in a very quick time. And that isn't what we want to create, really. Whilst we'd love that to be the world we are operating within, which is you can put up wooden structures and not worry about them getting burned down. We're not quite there yet. So the shipping containers are, obviously it's got a storage element to it, but it's also like a box that you'd, if you think about Christmas or any sort of time of year, actually what's inside the box is probably not as exciting as what you project upon it or think it could be. So you can really use it as a beautiful way of exploring with people, what would you want to come out of this box? And that is a kind of, it's a conversation. It's always a conversation, just as John was always about conversation. It's a physical, it's better than a clipboard in my mind. I could stand in a park and just have conversations with people, but they're a little bit alarmed by lone women with clipboards. A shipping container definitely is a bit of performance, I suppose. And this one was actually the legacy. The first one was the legacy of the March of the Robots, where we acquired a shipping container to be a roving robot lab, sort of managed by a steampunk, time traveller. And then when we came to the end of March of the Robots, I was left with a shipping container and no plan of what to do with it or where to put it. So it went on our common land near where I lived. And it was really only supposed to stay there 28 days because planning says you can't stay for more than 28 days. And I was exhausted as well. So part of the beauty of this is it became the Playbox because that's what people wanted it to be. So it was the kids, and it was like, are you opening that mess? And I'd be like, for God's sake, I'm tired. So it didn't have much in it, and really that was the joy of it. It got filled up very quickly by other people's stuff. People donated things to it, like stilts and whatever, those rocket things. There were people always kind of going, do you want something for your box? And then it then needed storage because it was becoming unruly, and it was down to me every night to sort of tidy it, etc. So the idea of the Playbox really was that it was an opportunity for people to tell you what they wanted. And then beyond telling you what they wanted, it was me being too tired to do it for them and saying, well, if you want it to happen, you're going to have to make it happen yourself. I'm happy to open up, but it's down to you if that's going to happen. So I use that metaphor in a kind of from a consumerist mindset of like, deliver us a service, to actually, if you want something to happen, you're going to have to make it happen yourself. So we make our own fun. And so I'm the catalyst, really. The catalyst who actually just wants to sit in a chair and watch everything else happen. and not feel too guilty about that. That's my theory of change. Is like, how soon can I disappear? Much my thinking these days, actually. How long am I needed for before I can go and vacate the scene of the crime?
Well, with the title like Chief of Play Galaxy Division as on your Twitter, I think you're not going away anytime soon.
But the wonderful thing, and I'm just gonna say this, because like the March of the Robots was very conceptual for a lot of people. They were like, why are you doing this? The beautiful thing about a physical object like the shipping container was it did take away the why, but more than anything, it allowed this sort of more the person who wants to go, how much does that weigh, and how did you get it here? You know, the sort of very formal material qualities of something. They could have a conversation about. Would that fit in my garden? How much does it cost? Those types of things. So it was much easier to then break the ice for people who were otherwise a little bit freaked out by the idea of exploring humanity, as much the Robots was really, by a box. And so that's why I love the box, because it has multiple ways in which people can be curious and have a conversation. So that still hasn't gone away. So I think if anything, I'd just like to be the pub landlady without necessarily the alcohol. I haven't quite worked out the remuneration of that yet, though.
What are you looking to make happen in the next 3 to 6 months?
Well, we have so we do need our own site for them, which has been the ongoing quest for about 4 years now. Not just for this, we've got 3 that are currently in use now. I say in use, you know, could be used when we're not in a pandemic, and they rove, and they got quite different. There's one that's going to be a tech box when it's fully finished, so like a kind of place where kids can make their content and adults can go and have a cup of coffee, and they're locked in a box and they don't have to think about them. So the creative tech box, and then the other is a sort of more free play, loose parts play, all that kind of stuff. And then one was going to be turned into a beach box, but we think it might be a bakery box now because everybody wants to eat donuts and we want to make some money. And then we can pretend to do donut economics through the guise of a shipping container. And I say pretend because I still don't really quite understand it, but maybe by setting myself that goal of understanding donut economics through a donut box, I might be able to understand it better with other people, is my thinking. So the site that we could just stay on for a couple of years without having to sort of worry is part of that. And then the dream of that site really is we can produce new containers. So the whole thing of if we can imagine it together, we can make it. That is the strapline, really. So being able to prove that, you know, like I'm just an unassuming Chief of Play Galaxy Division kind of person. Well, if we can be imaginative and daft and dream beyond our current realities, what would we be making and doing and baking and growing? And, you know, a utopic quest it is.
Entirely possible, Emma. I have every faith in you. I've seen, you know, what you've been able to do so far, and I think you're the kind of person who inspires people. And I hope that some people listening to this will feel inspired to support you and get involved in some way. Whereabouts in the country do you want the playbox to be located?
Well, I think since the pandemic, I have actually thought I just do want to sort of explore that sort of a 15-minute neighbourhood. I would have been quite happy to be in the centre of town, and we're in Leeds, obviously. But with a view to it being able to be a sort of model that could work elsewhere. So what I'm really not brilliant at is the business commercial side of things. So I'm trying to work a little bit on that this year as well, to go, it's all very well and good. As I put it, financing your own folly. You know, I've run a wonderful life, but it doesn't actually really, I'm not going to have a pension out of it. So there needs to be a little bit more thinking about that, not to the degree it spoils everything. But so hyperlocal, which is something I've always been passionate about anyway, but it's always trickier working in your own patch. that is always a challenge, to be able to make a living from where you actually physically live, unless you're working from home kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I've shied away from that. Plus, I've always felt that play and creativity needs to be really, really super visible, and not just in institutional spaces. So the city centre, to me, or the place where all the power resides, is the local locus of power and decision making, doesn't often reflect any of this maker culture of us as citizens empowering ourselves in places which the real estate value is really high, right? So we talk the talk quite often of our values or our policies or what have you at a high level, but we don't always do that in a legible, experiential way in places where people will convene. So I feel like where I'm really quite irritating to people is holding firm on that belief that we've got to be visible in our intent. So if we say we're this kind of city or that kind of city, well, how do you experience that if you're a 3-year-old or a 90-year-old?
Yeah.
If you're age-friendly, child-friendly, compassionate, show me. What's that look like in your architecture, in your interventions? So, you know, trying to put yourself in the heart of a commercial environment, which when you look like a raving hippie womble person, is not always very kind of like, you know, show me your business plan and your investors and da-da-da. It's like, no, it can't be that way. We've got to do things.
I'm looking forward to the care home where we all live when we're a bit older, and we all can share all our ideas and concepts and holograph each other to, you know, to, oh, you must meet so and so, because
Yes,
we've got, you know, we're just making a better world for other people and for ourselves, hopefully, as well. Emma, if people want to follow you on Twitter, you're Emma M. Bearman, Bearman, and I find your tweets always refreshing. It feels a bit like a stream of consciousness. I'm not sure that you sit down with your spreadsheet every day and decide what you're going to say. I think it's, what about this? What about that? You know, online. So I do like that. I'm a bit like that myself.
It's unfiltered, unguarded, and for someone who kind of spends a lot of time not working in an organizational structure, it is my processing out loud. And I think I've got ADHD as well, so I think there's definitely something in, better out than in. I'll ruminate if I don't just spit it out into the world.
You've got over 10,500 followers, so you must be doing something right. You know,
and they all mute me. I'm honestly. I do actually help people with their social media, and one of the things that a lot of people fear is ridicule, isn't it? Or like, I don't know. And I'm just act like nobody gives a shit about. I'm sorry, I keep swearing. But it doesn't really matter what you put out there, because you will find one person possibly who feels the same way as you, and that's all that you've got to concentrate on, is the one-to-one relationship stuff. And then the many to many will take care of itself.
Well, I noticed that you are followed by 500 people I also follow, so we obviously have a lot in common.
I think there's a good Venn diagram there, isn't there? I feel really bad that I haven't been tuning into this each week, so just remind me, what's the best way of being able to put you in my diary?
Dr. Tech Show, Mondays, YouTube, 12 to 1, every Monday. And
it's live.
It's usually live. It's not today because I had technical issues, but
there's all the previous issues to go back to.
What tips have you got for me before you say goodbye to me? What do I really need to take away from today's chat?
Have complete faith in yourself. You did a brilliant job. You know, you are achieving. I don't think it's worth saying don't get complacent. I can't see you being complacent ever, but you are doing what needs to be done, and keep the faith, really.
Absolutely.
I think that's what John would say as well.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for having me on. I feel like part of a community by coming on today.
It's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming.
Let's just cover a few more stories before we go, just because our listeners like to keep up to date. One of them told me recently that she learned something that she was actually able to apply about outdoor Wi-Fi. So I'm very pleased.
I'll take that. Yes.
Yeah. I need that outdoor Wi-Fi. You see the YI in my picture here?
Okay, yeah.
That is the quest of like powering the box so that it can have It can do time lapse. It can do, you know, listening to bird song. It can offer Wi-Fi to the kids who come and literally want to play YouTube or whatever. Not download games, because that's too much really. But yeah.
Well, on Hope Radio, where this program goes out on a Tuesday from 7 to 8. Hello to all our Hope Radio listeners. They have set up some picnic benches in a kind of a working area, and we needed, and we're going to be working there when we're there. We need to have Wi-Fi there. So Penny Whelan, the station manager, has set up outdoor Wi-Fi, so you can talk to her about what she heard on the show.
Her. That sounds
amazing.
Great. Perhaps we should get her on the show to explain how that all works.
We might do that, in the near future. So just a couple of stories from Scotland. Essential digital skills on, I don't know if Sweyn's going to be able to get this up on the screen, but it's skills.checkup.scot. 3 checkups to allow you to measure your digital skills, which we all could find useful these days. Foundation skills, life skills, and work skills. So if you want to measure what your skills are in those areas with some very simple tick boxes, then it's handy. It's handy to go through that, because I think often people don't know what they know, how much they know. It reminds me of my mother. I was telling Sweyn the story earlier in the week when we did our editorial meeting. My mother had her Wi-Fi boosted at home last week. But she told us that me and my 4 siblings, she was really getting it done for us, because she never uses it. So I said, oh, okay, so you don't use Facebook? Oh, I do use Facebook. Yeah. Okay, so you don't use email? Oh, I do use email. Yeah. So you don't use Zoom for your yoga classes? Oh, I do use Zoom. Yeah, yeah. And you don't do WhatsApp video calls? Oh, I do them. Yeah. So you use it a bit more than you think, Mum. So there we go.
The good thing about that checkup is if you supply your email address, it will actually send you back a report, and it will send you sources of information that you can learn more about the things that you weren't too sure about. So it's definitely worth a look. And I'm quite sure that SCVO would not mind people in the rest of the UK using it for that purpose.
Absolutely not. They're very cooperative. Yeah. Okay. The next one was a story from webfoundation.org. The heading was "Leave No One Behind: A People-Centered Approach to Achieve Meaningful Connectivity," and this was something from the 2021 high-level digital debate of the General Assembly on connectivity and digital cooperation, where they're encouraging the international community to put people at the centre of their approach to ensure no one is left behind without affordable access, skilling, and basic public services. And this is a call out to governments, industry, multilateral institutions, civil society, and international financial institutions to work together and lead the way to close the digital divide by 2030, to invest in affordable technology solutions, to empower people everywhere, and to mobilize new financing models to reach the unconnected. They especially want to foster innovative and sustainable financing, including blended finance models and multi-stakeholder partnerships to address all aspects of human connectivity, including, as they say, skills, utility, affordability, and target key groups, including women and micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And again, these are songs that we sing regularly on this show, and we're very pleased to hear about them. And their final line was to protect the most vulnerable online, reminding us that we need to keep human rights at the forefront of our efforts to close the digital divide. So amen to that, and we'll certainly keep singing that one. One last story, I think, before we close the show. Sweyn, Go Digital, Lessons Learned in New Horizons. This is from communitysavers.net, asking what we've learned about digital inclusion. And they say digital skills sharing focus both on equipping group leaders with skills that will be useful during the pandemic, such as organizing online meetings, but also skills that are critical for managing a community group over the longer term, like creating files and folders, where to find them, and knowing where to find them again. And these were sessions tailored to priorities identified by these digital champions themselves, and they've experienced increased confidence. And if you go to the very end of the story, they talk about the practical lessons that they've learned and what works. So they're saying Zoom screen sharing and remote control access were very helpful with online sessions. And asking someone how they learn best and how they found these sessions that can improve how they learn the next time. Highlighting similarities across software, patience, flexibility, and practice. I can't say this often enough. We need a lot of patience when we're teaching people online. Encouraging me to explore by asking questions, clicking on things to find out what they do and making mistakes. So learning by making mistakes. And then they also have a list of what to avoid, which I think is also very important. So avoid teaching too many things in one session, avoid moving on to a new topic too quickly, avoid making assumptions about what people will already know, and avoid remember that most people prefer face-to-face training when possible, and progress is much quicker. So some great guidelines there for people who are helping people to get online, which is what this story is all about, this program is all about. So as a whistle-top tour, thanks again to Emma for coming on the show. And we hope that you continue to have great success in what you do. And if we can help with that, please do let us know. And for coming to the end of the show, please have a great week, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.